Hey guys, it's Union, and in this video I'm going to be talking about why the Russian conquest of Lysychansk is probably their greatest achievement throughout this war. This video is split up into 4 parts. The first one is the 5th of May, then the 19th of May, the 2nd of June, and finally the 20th of June to the 6th of July. Now, why have I chosen these dates? Not only do the maps begin on these dates, but these maps begin on these dates because they are the very most significant times during this battle. We see here in the 5th of May is when Russia has reached Popasna and are conquering Popasna. Why is Popasna so significant? Because Popasna, like how we see Pisky today, is one of the most fortified cities in Luhansk, and by taking this, the Russians had a springboard to further push their invasion to the rest of the Luhansk region. Now, the 5th of May, we saw the fighting entering Popasna and them taking most control of the city. Moving on to the next part, the 19th of May, we see here how the Russians have managed to take Popasna, and they have pushed into the northwest and southwest, where they have tried to make this pincer maneuver where they advance towards the north, and at the same time from the northeast they advance towards the west to connect the two attacks. And at the same time they reach Soledar by pushing straight west and capturing all the villages on the way. This was done in succession as the Ukrainian defenders could not keep up with the Russian mechanized units. The reason why they went to Soledar is because Soledar is one of the most fortified cities, similar to that of Popasna and Pisky, and it is also one that connects basically all of the Donetsk region with the rest of Luhansk. This whole cauldron is connected by this city. By pushing through Soledar and taking control of it, they could have pushed further into towards the Severodonetsk River and cutting off this whole cauldron. However, it seems that they didn't have enough manpower for this, so they decided to take control of these areas and closing the cauldron down south and towards the northeast to take control of the Luhansk-Donetsk border so that they could announce some kind of victory. Hello everyone, do me a favor and subscribe. Thanks a lot. In the next one, we see here that they have closed the cauldron down south and have taken control of the Donetsk-Luhansk border from the south, and they are pushing towards Bakhmut and Pokrovsk, as well as Soledar at the same time, fighting along this road that is the main highway between Bakhmut and Lysychansk. So, we still see fighting in this area as it hasn't changed much since the last 2 weeks that we didn't cover. This was because of how we see that the Russians have managed to push westwards. So their goal here was to take control of this road here that would cut off the main supply route between Lysychansk and Bakhmut, as this supply line being cut off allowed them to weaken the Ukrainian defenders in this area, as they are fighting heavily around Severodonetsk at this time, which consumed a lot of their ammunition and supplies, as the fighting was very heavy. At the same time, down south, we see that these are open fields, so they use most of their heavy equipment in this area, which is why that their strongest resistance for the advancing Russians is down here, because that's where the Ukrainians were focusing their defensive capabilities. Now, finally, we go to the last part, which is where the Russians managed to close this cauldron and cut off, the estimates vary, but between 2,000 and 10,000 Ukrainian defenders in this pocket, as well as do the final touch on the Severodonetsk city. Now, in the following days, we see the Russians advancing a lot, as they had now cut off the supplies for weeks, as well as pushed and intensified their fighting, which allowed them to take huge advances as they closed off this cauldron and started pushing towards the north to cut off Lysychansk escape. The Lysychansk defenders decided, some say it was according to the plan, but others say, which I'm more inclined to, that they started falling back on their own accord. As we see here that the defenders who were at the Pivolian bridgehead actually started retreating towards the city to defend the city further, while others were retreating, running away from the city. We then see the following day, comparing it to the past day, that the Russians actually started pushing towards Verkhnokamiansk, as well as taking this, trying to surround this oil refinery, as well as pushing further towards this road to try and cut off the second road, which is now their main road, as this one has been cut off for weeks, to try and cut off the retreating soldiers at Lysychansk. This also allowed them to push the Ukrainian defenders towards this road, which is the final road. And by going through this direction, that it leaves this area vulnerable, as we see the following day that they actually managed to cross the river here, which opened a new front and allowed the Russians to attack Lysychansk from 3 separate directions, and as well as putting this area into a vulnerable position, which forces the Ukrainian defenders at Lysychansk to retreat without the heavy equipment, as they have to retreat through the forests and the mud. At this time, the rainfall was still falling, and the area wasn't properly hardened enough, which allowed the at this point, the heavy equipment could pass through, but they were majorly like normal cars and non-military equipment had a harder time than actual military equipment, as military equipment is made to adapt faster to these areas. Of course, the heavy weight prevents them, but we saw that these small roads specifically were used to retreat the Ukrainian soldiers through normal civilian vehicles like cars and trucks, while the military equipment would draw too much attention and would be much slower, which would allow more casualties. So the Ukrainians used this road to retreat, and in their retreat they were under fire from the Russian soldiers, as they had cut off all the other roads. As we enter the final days of June, we see that the oil refinery was taken and they were closing in on the city center of Lysychansk, cutting off some of the soldiers that were in the midst of a tactical retreat in the south, as they were seeing that they were about to get cut off, and that was happening faster than they were expecting, as some of the defenders had already left, while leaving gaps in their defenses, which allowed the Russians to take advantage of that to cut off further retreating soldiers of the Ukrainian army. Now, coming June and at the end of June and the start of July, we see huge advances by the Russians, as they actually make a river crossing between the Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. This is because most of the northern troops had retreated, leaving the southern troops to be encircled by the Russians as they push from both sides through the main road, main highway, and across the river. At the same time, we see them pushing further north, trying to close this gap, and further south from the northern front to prevent any and to cut off any of the retreating Ukrainian defenders from retreating across this final opening, which actually still saw some Ukrainians retreating, but a lot of them were under heavy fire, which caused a lot of casualties within the defenders. Coming 2nd July, it is now impossible for the Ukrainians to retreat. Everyone that's left either has to fight to the last man or surrender, while Russia tries to take advantage of these developments and take the rest of the Luhansk Oblast, which would cause them to announce a victory over the Ukrainians. come July 5th, where they have successfully the remaining Ukrainian defenders in Lysychansk surrendered, causing the Russians to take control of all of Lysychansk, and announcing their victory on the 5th of July. Well, I think they announced it on the 4th of July, giving them a propaganda victory against the Americans, specifically, as the 4th of July is the Freedom Day of the Americans, and that now it's also the Freedom Day of Luhansk. But updating from this map, we see that a lot of developments, for example, down south, we see them overstretching and being pushed back eventually. However, we see as a result of this that Lysychansk, which was on a hill, surrounded by forests, a river, and all of these tactical advances, geographical advances, as well as being well supplied and well trained soldiers in this area, they managed to fall essentially in 2 weeks. And that is because the Russians managed to encircle this huge group of Ukrainian defenders, as well as one down south, which allowed them to take advantage of a huge opening, a gap in the Ukrainian defense, and making the most of that to push on and force the Ukrainians to fall back and retreat, as they had seen what happened in Mariupol, and that is not something they wanted to experience themselves, as they saw how no one eventually came to save them. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and have a great day. Hope you enjoyed.